I'd like to welcome to the stage a panel chaired by Lauren Pear, who's a former economist at the New York Fed, a writer and entrepreneur, and she's going to be joined by Jared Kleinert, co-author of 2 Billion Under 20, and Jules Schroeder, the founder of Create You. This issue about educating for the transition, this panel is particularly appropriate to have people who are younger who are going to have to deal more with the consequences than the rest of us. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you, panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Pear. I'm the founder of Education Evolution. We're an online education company that teaches college students how to find promising professional paths so that they can go through college with direction. And that allows them to take advantage of the substantial investment of time and money that they have to invest to go to college. And in a former life, I worked in finance. I worked at Goldman Sachs, at the New York Fed, at a hedge fund, and that informs how I think about education and this issue entirely. Today, to join me on the panel for education, I have two amazing guests. The first is Jules Schroeder. She is a serial entrepreneur, started her first business at age 18, runs a successful consulting company, and is heading a really interesting project called Create You that's reimagining higher education, combined with the People and Planet Project and the UN, which she's speaking at later today, by the way. So this is a high-demand speaker we have here. And it's a really interesting project. It's aiming at teaching individuality, entrepreneurial skills, combining real-world skills and mentorship in a year. So it's much lower cost, much lower time investment, and it's one of the really interesting initiatives for new education. And then rounding out the panel, we have Jared Kleinert. Jared is an author, speaker, and co-founder of a really great group called 2 Billion Under 20, which is comprised of incredibly impressive millennials that are breaking the age barrier and what we typically think of what young people are capable of. People in this group have made scientific contributions. They have created documentaries on important issues and diseases. And it's just an inspiring group, and it's great to have you both here.
Thanks for having us.
So I mentioned at the beginning, although I've moved to be an entrepreneur, at heart I'm an economics nerd, and that does inform how I think about this issue. And a lot of economists, actually, really don't recognize technological unemployment as a problem. They say we've been here a million times before, that technology has displaced jobs many, many times. Always workers are able to reintegrate into the economy, and we've seen progress and growth, and ultimately, it's a good thing. So we shouldn't worry about it this time. But I think they miss two very important points. And one is, although there have been many instances where workers were displaced and then found new work, they all cluster around the Industrial Revolution. They're all really examples from the same historical data point. And as any good economist will tell you, one data point is not compelling evidence for a strong thesis. And so it's a lot less settled. There's a lot less evidence than there appears to be that it's not going to be a problem and we're just going to reintegrate. And the second big thing that they're missing is that when the Industrial Revolution happened, there was a parallel transformation in our education system. The Industrial Revolution came to the US around 1800, and in the 1830s, there was a common school movement that was successful within a couple of decades. Prior to that, it was a decentralized school system, schoolhouses, apprenticeships. And then with this common school movement, there became a more centralized, more standardized system where workers were learning skills like reading, basic math, things of that nature that really prepared them to be excellent factory workers. And it was a very critical part of the success of the Industrial Revolution was having an education system that so well prepared the workers for the economy. This time we're going through a digital revolution. And economic historians peg it maybe starting at 1950 to 1970. So if you split the difference, that's 1960. We're now in 2015. That's over 50 years. And yet our education system still firmly looks like that standardized, centralized system that was created to teach effectively factory workers how to be good factory workers. And so part of the thesis that I have and that we're going to discuss on this panel is that this growing rift between the real economy and the educational system is an important contributor to this technological unemployment problem. It's not just that jobs are being displaced, it's that students, new workers, don't have the skills to thrive in the economy that we're rapidly coming into. So, to kick off a first question on that front, I'd like to ask the panel, what do you think the school system is doing wrong right now? Why is it doing such a poor job at preparing graduates and young people for the working landscape we see today?
Yeah, well, I think you highlighted it brilliantly, is that we have a system that has been designed, decades and decades ago, and it hasn't been upgraded. And so I think, the core issue is that, kids being 26 and after recently, graduating, I went to college not too long ago, is that the information that's being taught isn't actually applicable and relevant to the types of problems that we're facing in the world. So on average, it takes about 2 years for new curriculum to even get updated, at a minimum inside of the education system. So with technology evolving at the rapid pace that it is, there's just no possible way that our system, the way we have it, can keep up with the way that our world is evolving. And so I think that fundamental issue in and of itself is really what, is not working for a lot of our youth.
Yeah, I think John hit it earlier on the head when he was talking about the fact that we need to start acting on our passions and use that to accelerate learning. I think that's not only going to play a huge role in how we hire more effectively and how we kind of put off technological unemployment, but I think it also translates to the education system. If you have a disengaged group of students and you're not helping them accelerate their learning, then they are going to have to seek learning elsewhere if they care about certain things. So anyone in 2 billion under 20 has done that. If they developed a nuclear fusion reactor in their garage, they did that with all information they found online by accelerating their own learning in other ways outside the school system. Or if they wanted to build a company, they had to accelerate their learning outside the school system because school was not engaging and it wasn't really teaching them the things they needed to learn quick enough.
Yeah.
I think 2 years would probably be like bare minimum.
Super,
like
yeah.
If that's the legal minimum, it probably takes 5 to 10 years to flip an entire curriculum.
Yeah, and I think too, on what you're touching on, is we've seen the online course industry, it's grown to $107 billion this year. So students are paying on average, $150,000 for their 4-year degree. They're not learning what they need to be learning, and then they're going online. And $107 billion industry, there's obviously a massive gap. And there was a recent study that 80% of employers don't even want to hire students unless they've had experience, and the only way to really combat that is to turn online. There's also another interesting thing. I think 70% of millennials report feeling unhappy and disengaged in their jobs. So it's like, how do you combat that internal wanting to make more impact and fulfillment with what you're being presented with as your vehicle for exploring that?
Yeah. Hopping off that point on the fact that employers are looking for people with work experience, one way I think about the problem with our current education system is a huge misallocation of how the educational time is spent. I believe that we've confused college with the end goal. I mean, you talk to any student and they know they have to go to college. That's the focus. When you're in high school, you spend endless hours preparing for the SAT, for college essays. You don't spend any time, or at least I didn't. I went to a college prep school and I didn't spend any time thinking about what I might want to do after that, nor did I when I went to college. I was assigned an advisor who was an academic advisor who made sure I took the right classes. There was career services. You weren't forced to go. No one really went until junior or senior year when you're quite far along. So we're spending all of this time and energy acting as though the end goal is college, when college is only 4 years of your life, and you're going to be in the workforce for decades.
And how qualified is the Career Services Department to advise you on new careers?
Absolutely. I've talked to a lot of college graduates since, and they uniformly get very poor reviews, I have to say. Yeah. People are not impressed. They tend to push you towards the standard paths, not something personalized, which is an issue you touched on, which I think is critically important. I think that in the economy, specialization has almost morphed into personalization. It's got so specialized that to be successful now, you need a job that's personally suited for you. So that touches on some of the problems. What do you guys think are the critical factors? There are many ways to reimagine higher education and education in general. What do you think are some of the core features that should be incorporated in this reimagination of education?
Yeah, I think we should probably start with asset allocation and really figure out, if we have this kind of budget to put towards education, where is it going to be best spent? Is it best spent, hiring teachers as we are currently and having them teach in a very uniform way, or perhaps, this probably doesn't help technological unemployment, but maybe getting less teachers or more specific teachers to then kind of flip a classroom and allow students to learn in an increased way or in an accelerated way towards specific career goals. I think that would be pretty interesting. Also, kind of taking a lot of economic focus away from SAT prep and different test prep and flipping it towards career readiness and really things like meta learning and meta cognition, where we're actually teaching people how to learn and teaching people how to think rather than forcing them towards a certain way of thinking or a certain way of working, which is becoming more and more outdated. I think we really need to fundamentally change the purpose of high school, college, and relate it back to a ever-changing workplace.
Yeah. So that's a lot of the work, what I'm doing with Create U, which essentially it's this one-year online education platform. And the idea behind it is to kind of do exactly that, bring in top experts from various different verticals and basically put them in an environment with the students in an incubator where the students can learn relevant skills from people that are out there in the world doing them right now. So in real time, students can be learning. And I think having that mentorship component also with the application and experience component, I think that as we move into the next 5 or 10 years is going to be vastly important. As a lot of business owners that are sitting here right now, it's how do you find quality people? And then as we've heard earlier this morning, less and less do you even need people to do these jobs. So I think connecting students with the right skills that they need so that they can actually be out there working in businesses before they even leave an education program, I think is going to be an absolutely essential point. So I see that being very necessary.
Absolutely. I'd add on to that I think that a focus more on emotional intelligence and ability to work in teams and that sort of softer skills, which is what a lot of employers are complaining about. We still focus on raw intelligence in school, things like the SAT test. Also, I feel that school really doesn't help team learning. When you are in a team in high school, it tends to be like an A student, a B student, a few C students. The A students learn to hate it because they're carrying the weight for everyone else. The C students learn to freeload, and it just does not, it doesn't teach the sort of teamwork, which is really what's needed in the future. Entrepreneurship is another area that's, obviously there are a lot of jobs that are going to exist there in the future, and that takes empathy too, to understand what your market wants, to understand what your client wants. You need to be able to really tap into what they care about. And yet we spend very little time in school currently teaching these sort of emotional intelligence skills. So I think that also needs to, and that's one of our big advantages over computers, right? We can't compute faster than a computer, but we can understand the feelings and where a human is coming from better than a computer. So we have to focus more on our human competitive advantage, I think, which we're failing to do at present.
I think I would to add on to that, I think we're also entering an era where individuals, our youth, really need to step into a world where they choose themselves. And so no longer can you just be a part of the system where you go to college, you spend your life, you go to college, you get a job, and then for the most part you're provided into this career path. Now it's really like looking at yourself, okay, well, who am I? What is my expression in the world? What can I offer? And then what are the skills that I need to learn to essentially commodify myself so that then I can go out there and participate in the world in whatever fashion that might look like. That might be working at a job, but I think entrepreneurship in and of itself is like an inherent quality, whether you're actually an entrepreneur in your own company or you're an entrepreneur in the workplace, in someone else's job. And so I think recognizing that and teaching to that rather than, this mindset machine, life's going to be done for you, and how it's traditionally been, because it has been for the most part, is going to be a really important distinction as we move forward, is that students really reclaim themselves for their piece of this puzzle in the world.
Absolutely, and I think you speak to, I think the jobs of the future, you're going to have to define for yourself more. It's going to be less like there are applications for what's available. Even, I like your point about you don't have to be an entrepreneur. I think an entrepreneurial employee is the future employee, and that's someone you can go to a business website, think about what could they be doing that they're not doing. Email the relevant person, start adding value, give ideas, and students simply aren't taught how to do that.
I think the other day we were talking about potentially flipping the hiring system and kind of making new credentials for hiring, because I don't know if a degree is necessarily the best way to hire someone, nor is experience if we have newer and newer jobs that haven't been done before. So
I'm gonna cut in because that leads into our final question, which is perfect. So what do you think are the impediments to changing the system? You just talked about the credentialization, and maybe you could continue riffing off of that in the context.
Yeah, I was going to just offer a potential new solution, because we can go on about problems for days. I have this idea called a zone of genius, where you very simply look at your passions, your skill sets, and what the market values, and in the middle is kind of the one thing or one set of traits that you do better than most people in the world. And so you can use that to kind of cater your education towards making that your absolute biggest strength. You can also cater that towards the workforce. For example, mine is to connect people and ideas together to accomplish bigger things for society. So I know that my strength is in the soft skills. It's in taking these disparate ideas, disparate people, thinking very strategically about connecting them. It's not in technology. It's not in learning the newest coding language. But because I know that that's my strength, I can easily relate that to the things I need to learn. It also is relatable to an employer if someone was ever hiring me, although I, as an employer, am looking at potential employees, and I'm looking at what are their zone of genius, and how can I either find different people to join my team that will fit the zones of genius that I don't have, or that our team doesn't have, and rather than just looking at a resume or looking at kind of a credential, I can give them a process of finding their zone of genius, whether it's a mixture of like a StrengthsFinder 2.0 and unique abilities and a Colby-A index, mixed with a few other strategies. You can change the hiring process to fit your team better and to accelerate learning.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would be curious, how many of you in this room have students or have children that are in college or about to be in college or have graduated college? Show of hands. So I'd say a sizable amount of you. And I asked that question because I think in terms of the impediments, the big thing is this conversation, right? So like, it used to be, if you didn't go to college, and it still kind of is in a lot of ways, that what kind of success do you have in this world? And so that's why top companies like Ernst & Young just announced, hey, actually, we're not going to look at degrees as a requirement. Google now sources 27% of their hires don't have college degrees. So the conversation in and of itself, is college the only vehicle for teaching a youth, a young person, how to support themselves and how to have a great life? I think that in and of itself is the question we need to really look at. Because I think college isn't necessarily the only vehicle how it used to be, and creating innovative solutions like how you were discussing, or Create You and some of those other things, I think is going to be really important.
I don't think college is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's looking at it from an individual standpoint, understanding your zone of genius, understanding where you want to accelerate your learning, and figuring out, okay, if I invest 4 or 5 years and 100 grand plus, am I going to get this return economically from that decision, or am I going to accelerate my learning and get much more of a return elsewhere, maybe starting a business, maybe going to work for an early startup, other ways. So college isn't necessarily bad. It's just, let's become a little bit more conscious about that decision rather than shoving people systematically into perhaps a trap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last point that I would add is really from like an investment perspective. As an education startup that is working primarily online and in communities, the funding element and the investment element is so crucial. And so to actually start investing in some of these innovative solutions that will, in essence, cause and affect our universities to upgrade their curriculum and the types of stuff they're offering is going to be increasingly important. And so, I know that is one we've definitely talked about as well.
Absolutely. Who do you think should pay for this investment? Who are sensible constituents to invest?
I would say business owners. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you in this room are, business owners, or we've come together for this conversation, that this is the future of the people that are coming to work for your companies or that are working for your companies right now. And it's, a lot of us in this room that, in a lot of ways, we're responsible for ensuring that this action actually takes place moving forward.
Yeah. And I would add the government. I mean, they're going to be on the hook for a lot of unemployed and unhappy populists if they don't help figure it out, right?
I would say the corporations are the 80 out of the 80-20, and then
Don't
government
disagree
might be
with
the
that.
20.
Great. Well, I think that concludes our panel. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you. Shall we?
Thank you, guys. One of the things that I always talk about with education right now, given the pace of change during this phase change, is the fact that those who know a lot in the past, when things changed at a slower pace, had an advantage, a distinct advantage. Right now, those who know a lot and have known that for quite a while are at a distinct disadvantage. They have more to unknow, more to unlearn. And that is a very, very different world. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Scott Sand.